I remember that evening so clearly. My mother was trying to read the name on her prescription bottle, but she had to squint, leaning in close, holding the paper right under the lamp. For the first time, I saw her struggle to recognize the familiar letters, the ones she used to read so effortlessly. People often say that blurry vision is just part of getting older, but for me, it didn't feel that way anymore. It felt like a warning bell. I'm not a doctor. I'm just a daughter who watched the light in her mother's eyes slowly begin to fade. And that was when I started searching. Not for medicine, but for answers. For 3 simple foods that quietly, gently helped my mom see clearly again. At first, I believed vision loss was inevitable. My mom was 72, still active, still sharp. Just occasionally complaining about eye strain or needing brighter lights to read the newspaper. I didn't think much of it until she started avoiding going outside at night. She set down her favorite book halfway through, and quietly she began sitting in the kitchen away from the TV, saying nothing. I thought maybe she just needed new glasses, but the eye doctor said otherwise. Her eyesight was declining, early signs of macular degeneration. I panicked. I had always assumed that only surgery or medication could help, but what I discovered instead was hope. Hope that came not from a pharmacy, but from the kitchen. In this video, I'm going to share the 3 foods that helped my mother reclaim her vision. A surprising truth about fish oil I used to misunderstand, and how small changes in our meals helped bring her eyesight and confidence back. Part 1. Salmon restoring vision with omega-3s. I still remember the first time I took my mom grocery shopping and picked up a piece of salmon for her. She looked at me surprised. "That's an expensive fish, isn't it?" she asked. I smiled and said, "Not as precious as your eyes, Mom." When she first started complaining about tired eyes, I didn't think much of it. She could still do her errands, read the paper, tend to her little garden. Just sometimes, I noticed her squinting a bit longer at the fine print on spice jars. At first, I figured she just needed new reading glasses. But then, things began to change. One afternoon, she called me. Her voice was quiet, and I could hear the worry in it. "Sweetheart," she said, "I couldn't see Bai's face clearly when he ran into the room. I saw a blur, but not his face. Bai is her only grandson, the light of her life. And if she couldn't see him clearly, I knew we were past just normal aging." We went to the eye doctor. The diagnosis, age-related macular degeneration, AMD. It's one of the leading causes of vision loss in people over 60. I asked, "Is there a cure?" The doctor replied gently, "There's no way to reverse it completely, but we can slow it down." That sentence hit me like a wave, a mix of hope and fear. So I started digging. I read articles, watched lectures, flipped through medical journals, and I kept seeing one thing over and over again. Salmon. Not because it's trendy, not because it's fancy, but because it's one of the richest natural sources of DHA and EPA, the omega-3 fatty acids our eyes desperately need. What I didn't know is that your retina, the part of the eye that captures light, contains up to 30% DHA. Without enough of it, the cells in your retina begin to weaken. Your vision becomes blurry. You become more sensitive to light, and things slowly fade. I still remember the first meal I made her with salmon. I kept it simple. Steamed it with ginger, Added a touch of lemon and pepper. She took one bite and said, this is soft and tasty. That was the beginning. I started cooking salmon for her twice a week. Just a small portion. Nothing fancy, but consistent. And after just 3 weeks, she said to me, "You know I don't need to turn the lamp up to full brightness when I read anymore." My heart swelled. It wasn't the meal. It was the return of her gaze, her ability to look into my eyes again. I kept researching and found a study from the National Eye Institute. It showed that older adults who had higher levels of DHA had a 38% lower risk of developing advanced macular degeneration. That's a big number, and it makes sense. Omega-3s don't just protect the heart. They reduce inflammation in the eye, support the health of blood vessels, and prevent dryness, something that becomes common as tear production slows with age. But I also learned something else. Not all omega-3s are created equal. A lot of people take fish oil pills, but many don't realize that your body absorbs omega-3s far better from actual fish than from capsules, especially from fatty fish like salmon, sardines, and mackerel. So I started building gentle meals around it. In the mornings, I'd make her whole grain toast with a slice of grilled salmon. At lunch, maybe a salmon fillet wrapped in foil with veggies. At night, a warm bowl of salmon chowder with potatoes and herbs. Simple, nourishing, and made with love. 1 month later, we returned to the doctor. He looked at the test results, then turned to my mom with a smile. "Your macula is stable. No progression since your last visit. That's very encouraging." She turned and looked at me. Her eyes had that sparkle again. "I'm not telling you this to promote salmon. I'm telling you this because I once thought eyesight loss was just something we had to accept with age. But sometimes, the best medicine doesn't come in a bottle. It comes from the kitchen, from the choices we make, from the meals we share. If you're caring for an aging parent, if you're over 60 yourself, please know that your eyes are still listening, still asking to be nourished, still worth protecting. And maybe, just maybe, it doesn't take a miracle drug. Maybe it starts with a piece of fish gently steamed and served with care." Part 2. Carrots strengthening night vision naturally. There was a night when the power went out in our neighborhood. No warning, just darkness. I grabbed a flashlight, walking carefully through the hallway. But before I could even turn it on, I saw something unexpected. My mom, already in the kitchen. No light, no hesitation. Just moving around like she knew the way by heart. When I asked her how she managed, she smiled and said, "Funny thing is, I don't feel lost in the dark like I used to." That moment stayed with me, because just a few weeks earlier, she had stopped walking around after sunset. She said her eyes felt heavy, like the shadows were swallowing the edges of everything. That's when I remembered something simple. Something we've all heard since we were kids. Carrots. They're not just a myth. They're not just good for bunny eyes. They're real powerful and proven to help, especially when the lights go dim. At first, it felt almost too simple. How could something so ordinary help with something as complex as vision? But the truth is, carrots are loaded with beta-carotene, which the body converts into vitamin A vitamin that's absolutely essential for the eyes, especially for seeing in low light. When you don't get enough vitamin A, the retina can't function the way it should. You start to notice it gradually. You struggle to adjust when walking from a bright room into a darker one. Night driving becomes a challenge. And eventually, it becomes harder just to find your way to the bathroom without turning every light on. Back then, I didn't know the science. I just knew my mom's eyesight was fading. So I started adding carrots to her meals. A small bowl of steamed carrots in the morning, sometimes roasted, sometimes blended into soup, always with a little olive oil to help her body absorb it better. No pressure, no strict diet, just a habit. One small, gentle change at a time. 2 weeks in, I noticed her eyes didn't squint as much. She didn't ask me to turn up the brightness on her reading lamp. She started going outside again after dinner, just for a stroll in the yard. It sounds simple, but for me, it was a kind of quiet miracle. She wasn't afraid of the dark anymore. Her eyes were finding their way again. I later learned something that gave me chills. Vitamin A isn't just important, it's vital. And a deficiency in it is the #1 cause of preventable blindness in many parts of the world. Even in places like ours, older adults can become mildly deficient without knowing it, especially if their diet is low in colorful vegetables or their digestion isn't as strong as it once was. And the best part, unlike some nutrients that are tricky to get from food, vitamin A from carrots is easy, affordable, and gentle on the body when eaten in the right way. You see, beta-carotene is fat-soluble. That means your body absorbs it best when it's paired with a little healthy fat. So, a drizzle of olive oil, a few slices of avocado, even some sunflower seeds on the side. These can make all the difference. It's not just what you eat, it's how you eat it. I kept the habit going. Carrots became part of our rhythm. Every week, I'd buy a fresh bundle from the market. The bright orange color always reminded me this little root was doing more than filling a plate. It was protecting my mom's vision. One afternoon, she surprised me again. I was flipping through an old family album, and she leaned over and said, "That's the house we stayed in during your 3rd grade trip, right?" She pointed right at a tiny photo with small faces and old handwriting. She hadn't been able to read that album in years, but now she could. Not perfectly, not like when she was 40, but enough to remember to recognize, to reconnect. And it all began with a bowl of carrots. Now I know this isn't magic. It's not a cure-all. But in a world full of pills, prescriptions, and promises, sometimes the simplest things hold the quietest power. Carrots don't advertise on TV. They don't come with warning labels or side effects. But what they do offer is a chance to nourish your eyes, to support your night vision, to keep you moving even when the lights go out. If you're someone who started to feel uneasy walking down the hall at night, if you found yourself reaching for brighter bulbs, stronger lenses, or larger print books, maybe it's time to go back to basics, not backward, but inward. Back to what your body understands. Back to foods that speak its language. And carrots, well, they speak vision. Softly, but surely. Next time you walk through the produce aisle, pause at that pile of bright orange roots. Maybe pick up a few. Not just for color, but for clarity. Because sometimes a little orange can bring a lot of light. Part 3. Blueberries, protecting retinal blood vessels, one bite at a time. There's something so comforting about the color blue. Soft, calm, trusting. That's how I always felt about blueberries. But I never imagined they'd become part of my mom's eyesight journey. Not until the day she sat down after reading a magazine and said, "My eyes didn't feel as tired this time." That might not sound like much, but for months she'd been saying the opposite. She'd rub her temples close one eye, even tilt her head trying to bring things into focus. Watching her strain like that broke my heart. So, when I heard that blueberries could help improve circulation to the eyes, I figured, what do we have to lose? At the store, I picked out a small carton. They were plump dark and just a little dusty with that soft, natural coating. I brought them home and placed them in a bowl. "Try one," I said. She popped one into her mouth and smiled. Sweet, but tart. Not bad at all. From then on, we started a simple routine. Each morning, a small bowl of blueberries fresh when we could get them frozen when we couldn't. Sometimes we mixed them into Greek yogurt. Other times, we blended them into a smoothie with bananas and spinach. It became more than food. It became a little act of care, a quiet promise we shared to keep trying to keep nourishing, to keep seeing the world. It wasn't long before she noticed something. Her eyes didn't dry out as fast. Her vision didn't feel as foggy in the late afternoons. The tiny red veins in the whites of her eyes seemed calmer. That's when I dug deeper, and what I learned only strengthened our new habit. You see, blueberries are rich in something called anthocyanins. That's the pigment that gives them their deep purple-blue color. But anthocyanins aren't just beautiful. They're powerful antioxidants. They help fight inflammation, reduce oxidative stress, and most importantly, they support the tiny blood vessels in the retina. Those fragile capillaries that keep the back of your eye healthy and nourished. As we age, those tiny vessels can weaken. They can become stiff-blocked or even leak. That's part of what leads to vision loss, especially in conditions like diabetic retinopathy or age-related macular degeneration. But anthocyanins help protect those vessels. They keep the blood flowing. They keep oxygen reaching the cells. They keep the retina doing its job quietly, steadily, faithfully. One study from the journal Ophthalmology found that people who ate blueberries 3 times a week had a 23% lower risk of vision decline from macular issues. Another study showed improvements in night vision and reduced eye fatigue, especially in older adults who spent time reading or using screens. And the best part, there are no pills involved, no prescriptions, just nature. Whole, simple, accessible. I started noticing more than just physical changes in my mom. She was reading longer, looking out the window more, following the birds in the trees without squinting. She even started doing her crossword puzzles again, the ones she had set aside because the boxes were just too small to bother with. Now, she'd sit at the kitchen table, pencil in hand, a bowl of blueberries beside her, and I'd think, these little berries aren't just helping her eyes. They're helping her confidence. They're helping her reconnect. I remember one morning especially. She leaned back after breakfast and said, "You know, I never thought food could be this powerful. I feel like I'm seeing clearer, not just with my eyes, but with my whole being." It brought tears to my eyes because I knew what she meant. When we start losing our vision, we also lose pieces of independence, pieces of joy. But when it starts to come back even just a little, it lights something up inside. Now, I'm not saying blueberries are a cure-all, but I do believe in their quiet power, in their steady support, in the way they show up, tiny but mighty. If you're over 60 and you've been feeling strain behind your eyes or blurry vision that comes and goes, maybe it's time to let food lend a hand. Let nature be part of your plan. And let blueberries be more than a snack. Let them be part of your care. At the market, now, I always grab a carton of blueberries, not just because they taste good, but because they remind me that healing doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes it's in the quiet things, the small, round blue things, the ones that remind us vision is not only about what we see, it's about how we feel when we see. So if you haven't yet, maybe tomorrow morning, start with a handful of blueberries, not just for your eyes, but for everything they still have left to see. Maybe healing doesn't begin with a prescription. Maybe it begins with a quiet decision, a decision to care for yourself or someone you love in small, ordinary ways that don't seem important at first, but over time bring light back into places that had begun to dim. Salmon, carrots, blueberries, just food, but also gentle acts of restoration. If you take anything from this story, let it be this: resilience doesn't disappear with age. It grows roots, it deepens, it waits for the right moment to bloom again. And the body, even after 60, is still listening, still responding, still trying. We don't need to fight age. We just need to support the parts of us that are still alive and wanting more. Because health isn't about youth, it's about connection. To food, to family, to hope. So now I ask you, what will you choose tomorrow morning? A handful of blueberries, or another forgotten pill? A piece of salmon, or another skipped meal? A bowl of warm carrots, or more time spent squinting at the world? You already know what I chose, and I've watched it bring my mother's vision and her joy back, one small bite at a time. So if this video touched you, please tap like, share it with someone you love, comment below. Which food surprised you most? Which will you try first? And don't forget to subscribe, because this isn't just a video, it's the start of something better. For your eyes, for your strength, for your story. We're not fading, we're learning to see again, and your next choice is yours.